So far this evening, we've heard from both of you that many things should be a priority: education, crimes, drug, and economic development, to name a few. But given the constraints on local budgets in the Commonwealth, we all know that resources are tight, and it is difficult, if not impossible, to focus on all of these things. Given these constraints, choices must be made, and it is these choices that reflect true priorities. As one of the textbooks I use states, the budget conveys a good overview of the government's total set of policies for the fiscal year it covers. The budget is not simply a financial statement, it is also a statement of policy. With this in mind, what are your priorities for next year's budget? That's the question, but I'm going to follow up and say I'd like you to ask you to be very clear here. I'd like you to state your top 2 priorities in terms of funding and resources and explain why these are your priorities. Ms. Giesta is first on this one. I apologize. Sorry about that. I should have been more clear.
Thank you. As I've always stated, the top 2 priorities for me and the city is combating the crime and also our education system. The way to, you have to be able to look at the budget and see what is a priority. And if we need to streamline some services in the city, we will. It's very important that the police have the resources that they need to combat the crime in here, and that's why I keep talking about going after federal funding. Another thing that I'd like to do to help with the budget is combine both the fire department with EMS, and that would help alleviate a lot of the budget crunch that we have right now. You know, the mayor has thrown a lot of money at the school department, and that's great. You know, we should give them as much money as possible, but make sure that that money is going to the right places, and that is making sure our students have the textbooks, have the equipment that they need to advance in their classroom. It's not about paying a superintendent almost $200,000 a year. It's not about hiring her assistants to come in and be making $80, $90, $100,000 a year. That doesn't help anybody. So my top priority is, again, helping the police officers do their job, community policing, and if that means that I have to go after as much federal funding as I can, I will. And you know, the mayor makes light of that. When you have over 3 years only gone after $130 million for a city the size of New Bedford, where we should be getting more like $250 million from federal funding, that just goes to show you what he knows or doesn't know about funding.
Thank you. I'll repeat the question. So far this evening, we've heard from both of you that many things should be a priority: education, crimes, drug, and economic development, to name a few. But given the constraints on local budgets in the Commonwealth, we all know that resources are tight, and it is difficult, if not impossible, to focus on all of these things. With this in mind, what are your priorities for next year's budget? I'd like to ask you to be very clear here. State what your top 2 priorities will be in terms of funding and resources, and explain why these are your priority.
Yeah, well, the short answer to that question is that the priorities are the same as they've always been with me, and that's with public safety and with education. We've committed ourselves to holding the line on supporting both public safety as well as increasing significantly the budget in the school department. We haven't just thrown money at the school system, we've invested in key places in the school system, including in buying new textbooks, including in buying technology, and a number of other important things that happen in the classroom. And managing a budget in this city is very, very difficult. Money is very tight in this city. It is tight in many cities across America, especially older industrial cities that lack lots of undeveloped land from which they could derive more in property taxes, cities that have older infrastructure, cities that have lots of social needs, including in the school systems to pay for, and large fire and police departments as we have. So it's very difficult. We've been very skillful at it. We have secured, and don't take my word for it, take Wall Street's word for it. The rating agencies rate every city in America, in fact every city in North America. And New Bedford, under my administration, has secured the highest bond rating in its modern history because we've been very skillful in managing our funds and increasing efficiency in city government and tweaking things here and there, consolidating departments, making sure that the taxpayers are getting the most of every dollar, and we'll continue to do that. The idea that somehow federal funds, grant funds, can fill the gap is fanciful. Every city in America wants that. And you should ask yourself, when you hear that from Ms. Giesta, that somehow you just have to ask a little harder. You have to press them in Washington to fund basic services. Your fire department, your police department, school department, all the things that we do. You just have to ask yourself, is that real? Is that realistic? Wouldn't every city like to have that? That's not the way it works.
Thank you. Ms. Giesta, you now have a minute.
Well, many cities do have that. Many cities do get the funding that they ask for. You shouldn't live in fear for asking for more federal funding. You know, we need to prioritize things in this budget. We are losing a tax base every day. There's a reason why your taxes are very high, and that's because people continue to leave the city. It's just too much money, paying $8, $9, $10, $15,000 a year on your property taxes. People cannot afford that. So we need to do more to make sure that these people stay here, because that's our revenue base. So if it means that we have to ask for more help again from federal funds, then we do it. So that's not a delusion. The city of Salem is about the size of New Bedford, and they get at least $300 million in federal funding for services. We can do the same.
Thank you. Mayor Mitchell, you now have a minute.
I find that very hard to believe. For direct services in city government, and federal funds don't operate that way. There aren't earmarks anymore, as you know, on Capitol Hill. Congress doesn't dole out money for specific purposes to specific places. It doesn't happen anymore. It's all grant funded, and the grants at the federal level are largely formulaic. You have to show that we apply across the board. The school system, the fire department, the police department, we apply for these things all the time. So let me just give you a very concrete example. So Ms. Giesta said that all we have to do with the police department is apply for these 4 grants in the Department of Justice. My former employer. 3 of those grants are part of the COPS program, COPS. It's an acronym. I can't remember what it stands for. We get that money. So that's 3 of them. We've had over the last few years 20 police officers funded by it. 6 are currently funded by it on the police department right now. There's one other grant program that we haven't got. It's small potatoes, less than $100,000 a year, 2 years max. That's not going to move the needle on anything. We apply, we have very good grant writers across city government, and they are generating funds, but to rely on federal funding is not realistic.
Thank you.